In Western culture, we read from left to right and top to bottom. So in this example on our screen, I have a couple of words that, according to the rules we just went over, should grab our attention about equally the same. The word creative and the word me are about the same size, about the same height, even though me is shorter, the height, the weight, they kind of balance each other out. However, if you follow along, I think when you first looked at this, you probably looked at the word creative first and then read down this line to the word me. So creative, artist, educator, daughter, sister, friend, me. And so just because we've got an element that is larger than some of the others doesn't necessarily mean it gets read in that order. So see how this one's larger than the ones next to it? That, according to the rules we just went over, says, well, I probably should have read that first. But because we are so culturally ingrained to start at the top left corner and work our way across and down, the way this information would be read is creative, artist, educator, daughter, sister, friend, me. So reading order is really important. We'll come across that several more times in this semester, I'm sure. So we will come back to that. Dominant and subdominant. So we've talked about areas of emphasis and contrast and where our eyes go first. We call those dominant elements, and when we have a whole bunch of things together on a screen, we tend to want to organize them so that we can look from one to the next in a specific order, which is called a visual hierarchy. So here we've got an image. It's got a lot of things going on, and this wouldn't make sense to somebody who's never seen a dial phone, probably. I watched something really recently called, I want to say it's Kids React, and it was to a rotary phone, and the teenager knew what it was, but pretty much everybody else younger than that was kind of clueless. So this might not be the best way to put together something that relates to a phone if you're talking about talking to people that are younger than, 15. Anyway, the element that is the largest, so it has contrast in both shape and color. It's got this really nice bright green, is this big circle in the middle, and that's where we look first, and we read the "what's your number?" Now, where does the eye go after that? These circles are arranged almost balanced and equally around the circle, but there is a order that you're going to read these in, and that order is going from here to the next strongest color, which is this red circle. So once I've established that, I'm going to naturally follow this circle around from left to right to read the information. So I've got "what's your number?" 1, 2, 3, 4, and then "call me" in this last colored circle. So I've used my brightest color and my biggest shape to create my dominant element. And then I've used my next brightest color to create a subdominant element, and all of the rest of these are subdominant to that, so less dominant than the main one. Leaving that example behind, let's take a look at this, where I got those words from. There's a lot of words on here, but because the way this is arranged, there's actually a natural order that you would look and read at these. So we've already covered that the words creative, artist, educator, daughter, sister, friend, me are going to be read in that order. And even surrounded by all of these others, they will still be read in that order because they have more visual weight than the other elements around them. They are larger, the color, they are heavier, they're completely different font, so they contrast in all of those ways, and if they were also a different color, it would even increase that contrast. But once we've read down there, that's the first element, that's the first order of hierarchy. What's the next order? Well, my eye would most likely start up at the top of this group, just because when there's a whole lot of things going on, we tend to, again, just go to that top left corner just sort of by default. So I'm left to pick between these other fonts. I would most likely look at the very unique looking decorative font that the chocolate chip cookies is written in. So as I'm looking at this, I read this statement first, and then my eye kind of scans over to see what these single words are, and then I start at the top again and read the smaller stuff. and kind of work from left to right, top to bottom, all the way down. And then once I stand back, I can kind of take the whole thing in as its entire statement. So that's dominant and subdominant. Another way to talk about dominant and subdominant is sort of how your English teachers talk about essays and thesis papers. What do you have in the, or maybe not thesis papers, but in an essay, you have your thesis in the top paragraph typically, and that is the first thing that gets looked at. So you want it to be the dominant idea that informs the rest of the piece. So that's where we start. It relates to everything else, and then we work our way through the next most visually catching thing to the next visually catching and work from the most to the least, and that's kind of dominant and subdominant. So all of these we've talked about and we've kind of touched on. They will sink in really over this whole semester because we will be pulling these back time and time and time again, and you'll be able to start utilizing them in your assignments and probably some other areas in your life, because this applies to more than just things we see on screen. You know, groupings around the house, again, color arrangements, lots of different applications.